Hello, and welcome to another of my series of conversations. My name is John Cornicello, and I welcome you to my series. Scheduling note, I'm taking a break again next week with no conversations because there's two big online events happening, the Palm Springs Photo Festival and the Portrait Masters Conference. These are two big events that I normally would attend in person, but you know how things are this year. So they're happening all next week. And so my next two scheduled conversations are October 1 with celebrity portrait photographer Greg Gorman, and October 5th with underwater photographer and fine art digital printing expert Cheryl Walsh. One more plug, if I may. My book, Anatomy of a Studio Portrait, is now available in a PDF form for only $7.99 via photowo.com. I'll put a link to that in the chat and a description of the recording when this gets posted to YouTube. But now talk about today. Today, my special guest is a dear friend and colleague from CreativeLive, Kenna Klosterman. Ken is usually the one leading the conversations, but today it's our chance to ask her questions and find out more about her travels and her projects. So please, a warm welcome to my friend, Kenna Klosterman.
Thank you, John. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is great. It's sort of like our 10-year anniversary.
I
11 year
know.
maybe that we've known each other and spent some time.
Oh, Sarit is joining. Sorry, you've allowed me to be a co-host, so I'm going to let people in as I see them too.
Yeah, I'll do that too.
But I did want to start with a hello, internet. Going back in time. How many people here watch CreativeLive or have in the past? Yay. Well, Ellen, come and join, come and watch.
Yeah, so
we've got Sanse, who is giving a shout out to her, who's watching on Facebook too.
Yeah, and Kathy's from Missoula and getting the smoke. Here comes Lisa Merrill.
Awesome.
So it's been an interesting year.
That it has been, John, but it really is fun to think back about when we first met, it's coming up on 11 years ago, actually. Mm-hmm. John and I first met doing a help portrait, right?
Yes, with Jeremy Cowart. And then Jeremy was the first person I worked with at CreativeLive. Celeste called me in and said, here, you want to volunteer for this? And about 2 hours into the first show, she said, okay, you're hired. You're here for all the rest of our shows. So that was...
Those were the early days, very early days. Well, we have the instructor who taught the very first CreativeLive when it became CreativeLive, Mr. John Gringo.
Yeah, do you remember the days we started out in the back of Art Wolf's studio?
We did. Little known fact.
Seattle. Yep. It was you and Susan back there. There was a few other people used to stop in and visit us. I'd say Roseanne Olson taught some of those classes too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How long ago was this?
It's coming up on 11 years, but it's been 10 and a half years since CreativeLive became CreativeLive, but it was Creative Techs before that when we were back behind Art Wolf Studio, and that's, was the early days of being able to broadcast live to folks around the world. I remember it was the most exciting thing to do all the shout outs of like where people are tuning in from. And truly when it, became just everywhere, you could really, just feel that as a global learning center. We've got Arlene Evans here as well, who ran Photo Channel for many, many years. Thank you for joining, Arlene. Also was a guest here on John's show.
Yeah, and if people want to unmute and say hi and ask questions, it's a conversation amongst all of us.
Arlene now running WPPI.
I got a fun fact about the early days of CreativeLive. When I was teaching some of the early classes, they would tell me to stop teaching in the middle of the class so they could switch tapes on their cameras.
That's right. That's right. I want to give a shout out to Sarit. Sarit is, I'm realizing now that I can flip through the different pages here, joining us from Israel. Hello, hello. Used to come to CreativeLive all the time.
Yeah, last time I saw Sarit was last June.
You look like you're outdoors, like in a windy storm.
It looks like the Seattle sun.
Hi, Sarah.
So we should also say hi to Aline here, who we met in Cuba.
That's right. Alain.
In addition to Creative Live, Kenna's been leading photo tours. So let's talk about a little bit about what's happening in that world and where you see the travel things going.
Yeah, so I actually first, there's a number of people on this call right now who were on that very first trip to Cuba, which was partnered with John Gringo. Oh my gosh, Ken Yu is joining. And John and I had we both love to travel, have traveled all over the world. And then we thought, well, John was already leading tours. And so, but we both wanted to go to Cuba, but you couldn't at the time travel to Cuba unless you were doing people to people cultural exchange. So John said, hey, you want to join me and lead one of these trips? And I said, absolutely. So John and I have been leading trips together ever
And that's
since
John
then.
Gringo, not me,
Yep.
John.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Gringo. I'll just call him Gringo. And that's John Cornicello was on that very first trip as well. And that's when we met Alain, who is Cuban, now living in the US, but was our photography guide in Cuba. And we've since worked with him leading tours there as well. Alain and I have led some non-photography tours too, but if you have not been to Cuba, it is an amazing place and amazing people. And part of my heart is there. Oh, and Lisa Carney just joined on Facebook and she came to Cuba as well. But what I will say is, yeah, the tour industry, photography industry, photo tours are obviously not happening right now. John and I had a safari that we were going to lead in Kenya. And so obviously that is on hold as well. So it's, I really appreciate that you're doing things like this, John, where people can, get together and talk about photography and the world of it, and at least talk about travels and perhaps, share photos.
Sure. Yeah.
And
What
all
are
of
some of
that.
your favorite places to go other than Cuba?
Wow. Well, in 2008, I quit the corporate world and took a year to travel and went to about 20 countries that year. But when it's hard when people say like, oh, what's your favorite country? Because I think it's all about the experience itself. And so it's more like what are your favorite experiences? And for me that year, at least, Nepal and Guatemala were two places that I had spent a good amount of time. And so I would say that Nepal is one that also holds a place in my heart.
Where did you work before in the corporate world?
Where did I work previously in the corporate world? I had worked at General Mills. I got my MBA back in 2002 to 2004. And then I went to work in corporate marketing, and that was what I thought I had to do, was go work and get that big company training experience. So I was marketing frozen pie crust at General Mills and refrigerated cookies. And then I went to work at Getty Images when I moved to Seattle, because I thought that was going to be like, oh, dream job, photography and marketing. And
did you know Roger Russmeyer?
Sorry?
Did you know Roger Russmeyer?
I don't think so. Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Roger Russmeyer.
I don't think I worked with him. No, I worked on a marketing product team for for the folks who were available for hire, and Getty represents, and so a number of different teams. But and then I went to work for Expedia. And thinking that, oh, travel and marketing, that's the next, like, those are my other two loves. But it turns out that I wasn't really, as a creative, I wasn't really thriving in the corporate world. And so eventually left and then ended up finding CreativeLive.
And how did they find you? Or how did you find them, or they find you?
Oh, I found CreativeLive. I mean, it was for and just to be like honest and frank out there, because I think it's important to have these conversations. I was incredibly depressed and anxious, and so part of leaving the corporate world was actually going on leave, and then just deciding that I couldn't go back. That wasn't healthy for me, and that was a huge, scary thing. And for a lot of people out there, you know, making that leap or understanding that is okay to make that leap is a challenging and yet can be kind of an amazing decision to make. So I was kind of at a very low point, and I signed up for Twitter. I knew that I've been photographing since I was 15, high school, dark room, love black and white, went to work for fine art photographers after undergrad, studied photography abroad for a semester. And anyway, and so I knew if I wanted to be, I thought if I needed to be a professional photographer that I needed to learn Photoshop and I needed to learn lighting. And so I ended up I had just joined Twitter and saw a tweet from Glazers, which is our local camera store.
Great store.
That was advertising free photography classes. And so I thought, free photography classes, this is great. I'm unemployed. I've got time. I can go and be somewhere every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. And so I went, and with my best friend, Susan, who was also a host on CreativeLive, we thought there'd be like hundreds of people because it was, hey, free classes. But there were like 4 people there. And so we kind of became the first CreativeLive junkies, where we were able to go, at the time it was more like community college where we do it online, but at like a regular time over the course of 6 weeks versus say like jam-packed into 1 3-day course.
Yeah, that's sort of how I got into it too, where Craig Swanson must have posted somewhere about having a creative text free Photoshop class. Come be part of the audience. And we just sat on some comfortable chairs. Well, might have been Jason Hoppy.
Yep.
Taught a class that was broadcast online. And then from there, it grew a little bit. They moved to Art Wolf Studio. And I used to take time off from my job at Adobe and go down there and watch some classes. And then they started doing the bigger broadcasts. I think the first one was with Jasmine Starr over at the Chocolate Factory, and I watched it online. He said, oh, they're only like 6 blocks away from where I live, and this looks like they can use a little more help with some of these things here. So I used to call Craig and say, I'm going to come down and help, and he was, okay, we'll figure something out. And all of a sudden, nothing was going on, and then Jeremy Cowart was coming in, and they needed an assistant, so they called me in, and the rest is kind of history.
That's right. And John is known for those bandanas.
Which I haven't been wearing for a while, but I brought one back out for today.
I appreciate that. Let
me ask a couple of questions. I know enough about CreativeLive to make me dangerous.
Okay.
But that costs money, correct? Yeah.
Which, you mean to attend the class or to buy the classes or?
All the above.
Okay, so the way that it has worked is that we would, and it's obviously evolved over 10 years, but everything was always free to watch when we were live. And so we were recording the events live, just like we are now, but people could participate, tune in, ask questions. That was kind of my role, was as the host, I would be supporting the educator, but then also in the chat room, chatting with everybody and curating the questions that we would share along to the educators. And then after it was live, you could choose to.
How soon after?
Well, we would turn it around because they'd be live editing. So we would turn it around. You could access the classes the next day usually. So if you could then purchase, the courses if you want that on-demand access, on-demand anytime, anywhere, but people can watch. And even today still there's 24/7. You can always watch something for free. There's we've got 5 channels, not just photography, but also art and design. We have money and life. We have everything from yoga classes to, personal finance classes. So there's always something playing for free. But then if you want to stop, pause, rewind, you can do that by purchasing the classes that you can then watch offline as well. So that's how it works.
And on
And
the
now, of course,
actual day, and on the day of, they repeated too.
That's
So
right.
we'd end the day at 4 o'clock, but at 5 o'clock it would start over. They'd play it back still for free, so people around the world, other time zones, can
For how
get
much?
to watch.
For how
It
much?
was- It was free at the time.
No,
I mean,
but
it
what,
was
the
free.
next day or next
Oh,
week or?
Yeah, we would roll it overnight, and then we'd start up again. So usually it was like a 24 hours afterwards that people could watch for free. And sometimes for various reasons we would extend that. But now again, those are replaying. There's always something playing on across all those different channels.
But those are, so everything is for free.
Everything is for free that's streaming at the time. So, or if you can purchase the courses, or you can purchase a subscription to have access to those
much?
over 1,500 classes.
How
So
much? How much?
how much is the subscription, or how much are the classes?
Yes.
I mean, they range from a variety of things.
So you would teach on a CreativeLive. You're a
I'm
photographer.
a photographer.
And how much would I have to pay to watch you give a class on your photography on CreativeLive a month after you gave it?
It could vary anywhere from a shorter class that might be $29 to a 5-day course that John Gringo teaches. That's, however, 35 hours, that might be $199. And so it just truly depended on the length of the course and that type of thing. Then we do big weeks. So like conferences online, like you're seeing a lot of people doing right now, where you could then purchase the whole conference for $299. So it was, as and then we also have people that would come and be in our studio audience and participate. They could do that for free. So yeah, that's the business model.
Kenna is someone as well who obviously is not American, you can tell by the voice. I first saw CreativeLive in Australia, and I remember watching live broadcasts and setting my alarm for 2 a.m. to get the live class. And sometimes I would fall asleep, but that's not because of the content, because I was really tired. But yeah, the live experience is really good. And what I loved about it was that you could ask questions, and most of the time, and because, you get so many questions, but most of the time you would get that question answered straight away, which was brilliant. Yeah, I really liked that.
Yeah, it was always cool when people would say like, it's 4 a.m. and I'm here watching and participating. But I do want to give a couple more shout outs. We got Kate Haley, who's here, who was also one of the original CreativeLivers. We got Ken Yu, who is a
Super
amazing
photo assistant and digital tech.
Has worked with us. Lisa Carney, who's another amazing teacher on there as well.
And we had just mentioned Glazer's Camera just before Kate joined in. We should mention that they're also doing their anniversary right now, their 85th anniversary. Is that correct?
It's true. 85th anniversary, independently owned family business for 85 years in Seattle, currently based in South Lake Union, 2-story beautiful store. And traditionally that event is a 2-day, you come in and you shop like crazy, and there's tons of educational programming. But now we're doing 6 weeks of educational programming online because, we can't shop in the way that we normally would. So we have over 30, almost 40 programs that started on last Friday going through mid-October. And I'm hosting many of those sessions and teaching several of them as well. So that's just a little bit about that. So just go to Glazer's website. You can see the schedule. we have 2 sessions with Sony today. One is with the ambassador, Sabrina Dang, and we have 2 with Thibault Rollins, who's another Sony ambassador, on this weekend. And it's all free. And some of it will be available to watch for free later. So
Awesome.
yeah, anyhow, that's a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you want to put the link to Glazer's classes, the live classes this week and next week in the chat, that'd be great.
I'm going to keep doing some shout outs as I
Yeah,
see them come
please.
in, John, just because you know I love it. Patricia Cash, Pat Cash, is on Facebook saying hi. She has been part of the Creative Live community forever as well. So that's awesome. Thank you. And Leah as well.
I have another question for
Yeah.
the person from Glazers. So
Shoot.
it's all for free,
Yes.
and you're so who's sponsoring it and paying for it?
Well, many of the instructors are from the different brands that we're working with.
I understand that.
And then in some cases, the store is paying the speaker. It just kind of varies. So, and they're short sessions. They're 45 minutes to an hour on different topics or techniques or genres. So the idea is that we're, providing something fun and inspirational. And then there's also a lot of promotions available that are in some cases exclusive only to the people who sign up for particular sessions. So it just kind of varies.
So right now you have Sony, you have Nikon,
All the major camera brands.
and
yeah.
and they'll pay for their quote unquote ambassadors or explorers to come and give this thing online.
Sometimes the store pays, sometimes they pay. It really is different by every brand. So yeah, but also some of the sessions are led by people who work for those companies, like Nikon technical reps. They did all the sessions that we did with Nikon last weekend. The stuff with Sony this weekend is a blend of ambassadors and tech reps. I'm a professional photographer and I teach on a regular basis. So, the store is paying me to do some of these sessions. So it just really varies.
What about Canon? Who are they sending, if they send anybody?
There's actually Roberto Valenzuela is going to be doing a session on the 26th, which is in the morning. And then we have 3 sessions lined up with 2 different technical reps from them. So a little video, some panorama kind of options, like just playing around with multiple exposures. And Roberto, I can't remember exactly his topic, but he does a lot of portrait and wedding photography.
Okay,
so.
I'm curious about one thing, but everything is done on Zoom, or everything? Or somebody has to go to Glazers out in...
No, everything is being broadcasted online to Glazer's YouTube channel, with one exception. One of the Canon sessions is going to be a Zoom-only private session because that instructor can't be on our YouTube channel. But outside of that, everything's being broadcasted to YouTube.
Why can't the instructor be on the channel?
There's, I don't know. I don't know the rules.
Probably some contract thing.
Yeah, it's totally a contract thing. I won't get into all of that, but most, except for that one session, everything is going out live to Glazer's YouTube channel. And some of it's available to rewatch and some unfortunately can't be kept on the YouTube channel. So like all the Nikon sessions we did last weekend kind of have to disappear after those live sessions because of the rules.
and they're not archived.
Like I said, some are available to rewatch at any given time. Like yesterday, we did one with Hana Mule and we were talking about paper. And that one's available on the YouTube channel. 2 days ago, I did one on instant film photography and printing, and that one's also available. So it just kind of depends on what the instructor is comfortable with, what contract rules are in place, and all that good stuff. So.
Yeah, just note, I just had to remove someone who's been harassing people in private messages. So if that was happening, I stopped it.
Yeah, it started as soon as I walked in. They were like, hey, how are you? And then it digressed from there. So.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no.
So anyhow, back to Kenna.
Yes.
No more about lasers.
Oh, I forgot.
That's okay.
Michael
okay.
always wants to know about the business models.
Yes, Michael and I are trying to figure out how to make these things go bigger. My chats.
Well, only because you and I are lancemen, and that's part of my DNA. Verstees? Okay.
So, what do you have planned for next year?
In terms of travels,
Yeah,
and
when do you think?
tours,
Do you have any idea when you think things will start getting back to normal, whatever normal
mean,
may be?
that's just so hard to know. I mean, John Gringo and I have, tentatively said that we're hoping to go back to Africa in 2022 now, not even 2021, because, right, John?
Well, we tentatively just immediately postponed the trip 1 year, figuring that things would clear up. But I have reservations now because yes, there may be a vaccine available in the early part of the year, but that doesn't mean everyone's going to have it. That doesn't mean everything's back and ready to go full forward at that point. So I think we may have to push it back again.
Yeah.
The reality check on this whole thing, really, it's not what we here in America are hoping will happen, but I know for a fact from my contacts that Africa doesn't want any Americans. Stay away. We don't want you. All right, and that will continue, I think, for approximately another 3 years, depending on what happens here. And what happens here right now, it doesn't look promising at all. At all.
Yeah.
I mean, people are saying, we're going to get a vaccine by this date. But don't listen to that person. That ain't going to happen. Because even if they had the vaccine, the question now is, how many people are going to take that vaccine if he says, we have it? So what? You have it. Take
Yeah.
it yourself.
Let's go back to photography. We'll deal with the vaccines as they come about. Does anyone in the audience have questions for Kenna? This is your chance to be on the other side here. You can play host now.
I have a question, Kenna.
Yes, Michelle.
I'm John's wife, by the way. My name's not there. What are you doing to fill your days at the moment?
This is a great question. Well, one of the things I did want to share with people and talk about is that I do host a podcast for CreativeLive that's called We Are Photographers. And we have, this week I dropped the 91 episodes so far, which is pretty awesome. John Gringo there's an episode with John on there. Lisa Carney, she was on, if she's still on, episode with Lisa. And it's just talking to photographers, filmmakers, industry folks. And it's a little bit different in terms of conversations on photo podcast. We don't talk about gear, the latest gear or what have you. It's really about the human stories, about who we are as creatives and why we do what we do. So I spend a good amount of time booking guests and doing my research to prepare to have conversations with them. One of my interview heroes is Terry Gross, and so it's this kind of preparing to know what you want to get out of the conversation and guide it and drive it. And that's kind of what I loved about being a host on CreativeLive or guiding photo tours, is really kind of creating an experience for people, whether that's the person that I'm interviewing or the people that are there as part of that conversation and experience. So really kind of participating in creating what can be, transformational experiences and conversations, and talk about, the wins and the losses. So I am working on that.
Do you pick up a camera?
You know, the camera that I pick up the most right now is the one I have with me all the time, is my iPhone, and I just recently moved to a place called Whidbey Island, which is north of Seattle, and I feel very fortunate to be in such a beautiful place. So having somewhere, because I am such a traveler, I feel like I'm, you know, blessed with being able to travel around the island and kind of start to explore a little bit more. So even if it's with my iPhone, you know, I'm always kind of like, I don't know, I just
You're
feel like
engaging your eye.
yeah, I feel like I used to call it like my worldview is through a lens. Like I'm always, I don't know about all of you guys, but it's like I'm always, wherever I'm looking, even if it's in my house, I'm always like, coming up with compositions of how I would photograph, even if I don't have
We call those neurochromes.
exactly, the neurochromes. I do a lot of
Neurochromes.
neurochromes right now, but
Yeah. Unfortunately,
um,
I see with the telephoto eye, and the iPhone just doesn't work for me, or it's too wide, so I got to carry a bigger camera and a longer lens with me all the time.
but do you really? Because that's really interesting. I find it really interesting to talk about how we look and see without the lens in front of us. Was that a joke, or do you really
I do try to narrow things. I usually carry like an APS-C camera with a 18 to 400 millimeter lens on it, and I'm usually working at the longer end of it.
John is very serious, fill the frame kind of guy.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. And I think that's interesting. I think it, because back in like the film days, I always, you know, when you would go, you'd have a roll of black and white, and then you'd have a roll of color, and you had to think differently, you know, during when you've got that roll of black and white in there, because you're trying to see the world in that way of tones and things. And so, yeah, now it's like when you have, what lens is it that you have on, and how are you seeing? But I feel like I don't, well, maybe I do see sometimes in that telephoto. That's interesting to think about. I do a lot of street photography, so a lot of it is just kind of.
Yeah, that works with the 35 millimeter or so. I'm not a street photographer. Scenic cityscapes and portraits is my thing, and they all tend to be longer.
Well, and that's funny. I never use a telephoto lens. My longest lens is 85. I think the last time I had something that was like as long as 300 millimeter was probably 15 years ago, which is kind of crazy too. But
yeah, that's what makes us all different and unique.
Yeah, I think if I'm focusing in on something that's more detailed, it's often just that's like physically right in front of me. And I don't know, right now I feel like I don't have a macro lens, and I feel like I really want to get one, because there's so much that I'm kind of exploring in terms of, now that I'm in this surrounded by nature and getting into that more, you know, more detailed.
What camera mount are you using?
Canon.
Well, I might have a macro you can use for a while.
Really?
Next time you come into Seattle, let me know.
That would be amazing.
Anything. Let's try it out.
Suggestion.
What's that?
Get yourself a reversing ring.
A reversing ring. True.
That's all. Just get a
That's true.
reversing ring. You'll lose all of your automatic exposure,
Focus,
autofocusing,
everything.
But that doesn't matter, because all you want to do is macro, and you will be able to take some fantastic macro and micro images just with, I don't know, $30, $40 reversing ring.
It's a great idea.
And
great
the back
idea.
of that lens, and the back of all those lenses are of every lens is flat.
Right. Right.
I put my 2 cents in, and you could look at Moment and get their macro.
For the iPhone.
Since you're using your phone a lot, you know, because it's easy, because it's, you know, tiny, and you just throw it in your bag or your pocket.
Exactly. We had this awesome class last year on, I don't know if anybody out there photographs bugs. But we had this class, and I just like it, photographing the macro world. It's just a whole other world, and I'm fascinated by patterns, and just as much as the human face, but like it's just a different. It's a different.
Right. I mean, when this whole pandemic thing started in March, I think March 13th, everything stopped. And I went for like 3 or 4 months without photographing people. So I was out photographing flowers and bugs. And that's when I got all my macro lenses out. And just I started doing daily walks, going to like a 4-mile walk each day with the camera.
Exactly.
And these past week, I've not been able to walk at all. It's just the air quality is just so bad.
Yep.
So
Me
really,
too. Me
so
too.
what we've done is Kim, my wife, went out and trimmed some branches off of some filbert trees and these really gnarly, crooked things. And now I'm doing still lifes of those in the studio. So
Well, one of the
always
things,
shooting.
exactly. One of the things that I started several years ago, and I think is a great project for anybody out there, is, and I haven't been doing it right now, but I was calling it 1 mile, and we talk about, eating local, and so or shopping local, and my thought was, well, we should focus on seeing local. And so you often just, even though we're visual people as photographers, you often stop seeing what is in your immediate surroundings. Like you just don't see it anymore. And so I wanted to photograph just the 1 mile around my home and just really focus on, seeing local. And so that's kind of my goal with Whidbey Island, is to really just, photography for me is always a tool to have experiences. And whether that's walking the streets of Havana, or being out in nature, and just kind of that extra, like taking those neurochromes but turning them into images themselves. So I don't know if other people have other ideas of projects that they're keeping themselves occupied right now with, but this idea and concept of just seeing differently within your immediate surroundings is something that's totally can keep you, occupied.
Yeah, in some of the classes I've done during this time, there's been definitely a couple of moments where I'm just like, if you're going for a walk around your block, you do that all the time, noticing those little things and trying to see those details. So that's where macro lenses can obviously come in handy, but even just slowing down and pausing and being more observant, and, especially, like I'll walk to the market that's close to me, and it's very easy to just do that walk and not necessarily notice what's around me. There's cars and sidewalks and streets. Sometimes there's really pretty flowers or things like that. And just like taking a moment to pause and enjoy those things instead of just like flashing by them. Of course, it's harder to do right now with all the smog and yuckiness in the air. We don't want to be out in it very long, but in general, it's a good idea to do.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, we've had this smoke the past 3 or 4 years, but this is really the worst. I mean, I used to
it hasn't
gauge.
lasted as long.
Yeah,
I feel
I
like,
used to gauge it
in
by
previous years.
the sun. Usually the sun would make it to maybe just above horizon before it disappear into the haze. Now, 2 or 3 hours before sunset, the sun is completely blocked here. I mean, it's crazy.
We have it here in New York now too.
Yeah,
That's
sorry,
what's so crazy,
yeah,
is
that
that it's made its way across the country.
Well, it's gone on to the jet stream.
Yeah.
And but the sunsets and sunrises are incredible, absolutely incredible.
The lines in Maryland near DC, you're saying you have it there as well?
Yeah.
Never
Last night with the sunset, you can see the haze in the sun, like crazy. I'm so sorry for all this that is happening now.
What's really amazing though is I flew over it last week flying from California to Seattle, and it's clear blue skies at 32,000 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all below that. It was amazingly clear and bright up there.
Which is a good thing to remember, John, is that there's always blue sky up there. It's a meditation tool.
Yeah.
So back to what else have I been occupying my time with? There is a lot of things to I don't know, just to focus on in terms of building back up maybe habits and things that you've let go. And I feel like I let a lot of things go when the pandemic first started. And, you know, it was kind of like, you let yourself like, I'm just going to watch some bad TV just to, you know, allow myself a break because this is like whatever. But, you know, this is the new reality. So I'm picking up a hobby of driftwood art. That's my latest thing. So I love the driftwood. I can walk down to a beach that doesn't really have many people. And so, yeah, so we'll see. But picking up a new non-photography hobby is like, it's not something I was like,
Difficult.
oh, I can do something non-photography related.
See, if it was me, I'd collect the driftwood and then I'd bring it into the studio and find ways to photograph it.
Well, I imagine I will be as well. But
so what part of Whidbey are you on?
I'm in Central Whidbey. So
I mean, I know Coopville and I know Langley, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just south of Coopville. So
okay, nice. That's a great area.
Yeah, near Green Bank is really is where I am, and it's I can't wait to have more visitors someday.
Yeah, it's interesting when I drive through Whidbey, I lose sense of direction. I usually have a really good sense of direction, but I think I'm going north, and I look at my compass, I'm going south. Just some way the roads twist through that area between Langley and Coopville.
I never know which way I'm facing. No, it's
okay, good.
So
it's not
strange.
Just me.
And there's different pockets of weather systems all throughout this island. But it's a beautiful place. Hopefully, in the future, I will have some retreats and tours here. So I also do mindfulness retreats.
Yeah, tell us a bit about those. I know Kim's gone to Costa Rica with you.
Exactly. So as my best friend Susan and I, we actually the Costa Rican one that John's wife Kim was the first one that we led, and at first we were going to lead an all women's photography and mindfulness trip to Costa Rica, and then we decided to drop the photography. Of course, people were there with their cameras, and that was like our community of people, so the people who came, but the real focus is on, you know, turning inside and just learning some of the tools that you can use to get through our daily lives, which are very helpful right now, because I believe we all have the answers inside of us already. So,
do you have a lot of chromes or transparencies?
Oh, me personally? Yeah. No, I don't.
Did you mostly shoot digital? Did you do a lot? Well, you've been shooting since you were young.
Yeah, no, I did a lot of film. I didn't do.
So you have a lot of negatives.
Negatives you have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And do you ever go back to those?
I thought you meant like slides.
Yeah, well, that's what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
But because of the same thing with negatives, do you ever go back to your negatives and take a look to see what you could resurrect?
You know, I have this trunk, and within the trunk are like old black and white prints as well as my negatives. And I recently went back because John Gringo and I were doing a weekly Facebook Live session for a few weeks, and we were talking about photo projects and went back to some of like our early photography, and so I went to like pull out, you know, just kind of some early day prints and things, and but I haven't actually done anything with the negatives themselves.
Did you ever think of scanning them?
You know, I used to have a scanner that had the little thing for scanning the negatives, but I wasn't very, no, I haven't. I think about it, but thinking about it and doing it is another thing. And I think it's really an interesting, I don't know, it's an interesting conversation to have about, for me, about the experience of photographing and then the like what you do with the images
Sure, that's a
afterward.
question I usually ask in these things. Is photography an experience or a product? For me,
And
it's the experience.
for me, it's the experience as well. And I, I found myself beating myself up about not doing as much with the images after the fact. And I do the things that I do, but I found that, that photography can be many things for many people. And for me, part of it really is, it's a tool for having experiences. And yes, the bonus is the photos that come out, and that emotion, and sharing that with people, and the emotion that it can draw out for people, and it's an art form and all of that. So I think it's a balance. But I once had Jared Platt on, who's another photographer and educator, on the podcast, and he asked me, and so now I similarly like to ask people, like, if nobody could ever see any of the photographs that you make, like, would you still make them?
Yes.
And my answer was yes. His answer was no.
Really? That's
And I found that to be really interesting. John Gringo, what about you? If no one would ever see your images, would you still make them?
It's a hard one because I'm split, because I'm real practical. So if no one's going to see them, then it's not practical that I take them, but I really enjoy doing it.
I can say yes, he would.
I think you're short-circuiting my brain.
That's why it's an interesting question.
He definitely would.
Would you, Michelle?
I would, and I do.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't see my images.
But you're like me, like, in walking around. Michelle was also in Cuba with us, and, walking around the streets, you would, run up to the little kids and, or what have you. Like, it's an experience. Aline, what about you? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, I would keep doing. Right now I can't go outside, so I'm working on my archives, and I'm doing collage, like
I saw that.
I'm doing something that my people used to. Oh, everybody used to do in the '60s, but what I have in mind, and it's just for me.
Well, I mean, that's what creativity, is. Creating something out of nothing. It's,
But then
a way to interact with the world.
But isn't that the definition between a professional photographer? No such word as a professional photographer, because you don't need a degree. You just need a camera and some, incentive. But the difference between a professional photographer and a hobbyist.
That's the age-old question, is, is when we talk about that a lot on CreativeLive. When do you call yourself professional? And I like to use, it was, I forget when, I don't know if John, if you were part of the Gringo, part of this conversation, but I didn't know that the word amateur meant for the love of. And people often look down on the word, or don't want to, oh, I'm an amateur. And but for the love of, of doing the craft. So is a professional photographer somebody who gets paid? Is that the definition?
What is it to profess? Is to be able to teach or to share. So professional and amateur are, the real definitions are very different than what we say they are in photography.
Exactly.
But there really is no such thing as a professional photographer, because you do not need a degree from any sort of school to call yourself a professional photographer. Except the United States government says if you make money from photography, then you're a professional and we want the taxes. That's the only difference.
As with anything. But then the question goes to, does it really matter?
Well, if I could chime in, I would say I think one of the biggest misguided beliefs among amateurs is that they should try to be a professional photographer. That's the definition of success. And they haven't learned to just enjoy it, enjoy life through it. And so just because you make money at it doesn't mean you're better, and it doesn't mean you're enjoying it anymore. A lot of people just need to figure out how to make it fulfill their own lives in the ways that it works for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and being a professional photographer usually means mostly 90% business stuff and 10% photography, if that much. It's not the glamour world that people think it is.
And you know, John Gringo and I talk a lot about, you know, it's a lifestyle for a lot of people, and it's a lifestyle for me. It's what my world is in terms of whether that's, you know, maybe I don't get paid for the images that I make right now. I mean, I had a way back when was, you know, was starting a business that was family photography, but and babies and all of that, like many photographers, you know, when they try to start a business, not try to, but yeah, when you're trying to figure out, like, do I want to be a wedding photographer, or do I want to be, you know, a family photographer, a product photographer, whatever it is. But my, you know, my income my life is surrounded by, whether it's photography education, being in the photography, you know, industry and world, in that, you know, so I think there's just many ways for it to be, you know, part of your life. Alain.
Yes, I have a question. John, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I know that everybody's.
I have an answer. That's what Alain always says. In Cuba, because I always have questions for him. Alain, I have a question. I have an answer.
So I know that everybody's suffering and struggling with all the isolation and these pandemic times or whatever. So do you think that you are learning something, or you think it's going to be in some way productive for you all this time isolated from the people, now that you live in an island?
So sorry, say that again.
Yes, my English.
No, I'm so sorry. I was going over and looking at the chat.
Okay.
My brain isn't as trained to do both at once anymore.
No, I'd say I make a beautiful presentation in barely English, but
I'm sorry.
No. My question is, all this time in isolation, do you think it had been productive for you? Do you have new plans? Do you think that you are using this time in a productive way, even when you are not doing anything that you usually do?
Well, what that makes me think about, Alain, is the word productivity, and use, you know, what does that mean in terms of us as humans and how we spend our time? And I think it was very interesting to move to an island at the same exact time as this pandemic broke out, and that I was going to be more, you know, isolated anyway. And yet but it's like everybody else is too, in a way. And so it's a very different experience, I think, than it would have been. But part of, I don't know, just a lifestyle choice is wanting to slow down a bit and be out of the city. And so part of that is learning that I don't always need to be productive, and that just experiencing the world is worthwhile. I can remember moving to right towards the beginning of when I moved here, and I was walking on the beach and there was a guy flying a kite, and I just watched him fly the kite, and I was like, I want to learn how to fly a kite. Like, flying a kite is worthy of my time. And I feel like there's so much in our society that is focused on productivity, and that, so part of this time and part of this, like, idea around getting into driftwood art or getting tools that are more like hands-on, is kind of redefining my definition of how I spend the time that I have here.
I want to chime into that for a change. Let's forget about the fact that we're talking about photography, okay? Let's talk about it in general umbrella terms as art. Do you think that a painter, just because he or she isn't at the canvas and an easel, doesn't constantly think about creating? Or a ballerina? Or a woodmaker? No, I mean, the creative process is more mental than physical.
Right. It's not in the execution. It's part of our DNA to always be thinking.
That's right. And so just because you don't physically have an iPhone or a SLR or a Blod or a 8x10 doesn't necessarily mean you're not thinking mentally, envisioning images that you'd like to make once we're out of these cells we call home and are able to go anywhere we want. Right now, we're in some sort of isolation. But I got to tell you that I am constantly thinking about things that I want to photograph, things that I want to create. I go into my archives and I scan stuff from before digital was ever envisioned. And I find stuff in the viz sheets that I said, holy mackerel, I did that? And I had to look because, yeah, my copyright's on the cardboard sleeve. And so I say, if I took a little piece of that chrome or that negative or that black and white and I blew it up and I made it something graphic, that's what I've been doing since I'm locked in. But we never, ever stop visually thinking about our art, what we call art. Okay, it's a photograph, and so what? It's still art.
No, I think that's really beautiful, Michael, and I agree. And that was kind of that.
Don't blow my cover. Don't blow my cover. Oh, no.
When I was, talking earlier just about that, yeah, the always seeing, but I would add a layer of that the art is more than just thinking, but you're also putting the emotion and feeling into it too.
But
and
that's
so,
just another layer. And eventually, when you stop doing that, you have to say to the wetware, which is the brain, okay, flatten all the layers, flatten it, and then you go out and you do what you were thinking and feeling and wondering about.
Well, this might be kind of taking this and interpreting it, but I think there's an upside to what we're all going through in that this is a pause on all of our lives. We get a chance to really think about what do we want to do, what's important to us. And I think once this thing is blown over, you're going to see people traveling, you're going to see people doing things that they've always wanted to do in their life that they now realize, hey, when that chance and opportunity comes around, I'm going to take it because things go pretty quickly. And so I think, like athletes get injured, this is our injury time. We need to sit out, we need to think about what we want to do. And then when we're ready to go back, I think things are going to be fantastic. And things
the other thing you have to factor into all of this is our mortality. I'm going to be 76 dealing with cancer. I want to be able to go out and do the things that I've been thinking about, but will I have enough time before I croak to complete it all? And the answer for everybody is no, you don't. So you just do what you have to do until it's time for you to go. And you pass all that information on to the next generation of artists. That's what this is all about. We learn from our you learn from your elders. You learn from the people in the past to go on for the future. There's a time set to all of this. So I'm wondering, I mean, I make a list of the things that I think about, and I have this. I have pages and pages of ideas that I want to do, and I'm realizing there ain't enough time in my life to complete it all. So I will pass it on to somebody else. I'll pass on some of my ideas to John. Right, John?
Yep.
And hopefully he'll take it to the next level. And when he gets to the point where he'll pass it on to somebody else. I think that's called play it forward. Play it forward.
Pay it forward, correct.
Yeah, that's all.
Well, thank you.
I like the concept though of play it forward, because that's the other thing I'm trying to focus on right now is allowing myself to play more, and you know, we get so serious about things, and we need to, like, the reality of it, but
Right.
I think, you know, when we allow ourselves to play more, especially when it comes to creativity. Of course, creativity is in everything. Creativity is in business, and, you know, all aspects of you know, cooking, and, you know, all kinds of things. We're all creative, but yeah, is just allowing that mentally, and sort of letting go into that. And because that's that, again, going from the thinking brain to the kind of those deeper levels when things are, you know, the concept of flow or what have you, things are, you know, coming through. So
We need
Cool.
to play more. Play is what we do. And once we start picking the things that we like about the playing that we did, that's where we pick up and move forward with it to create the imagery or the feelings that we want to portray to the rest of the world. So we need to play more. I mean,
I think that's the concept we're going to end this on. Go out and play.
Well, I think all photographers are somewhat like Peter Pan. And we live in a never, never world.
I can fly.
Oh.
So,
in my
Kenna,
dreams.
No, you can't fly.
Yeah, any
You
last
have to be
words?
tested.
Last thoughts you
I
want to
think
leave
that's
us with?
actually, I think that's a really beautiful way to end. It is, you know, think about one thing today that you can consider your time to play, and be okay with that. You know, go learn to fly a kite just for the sake of flying a kite and spending your time understanding what wind is, and, you know, and now I'm looking at wood in a different way and understanding the grains of, you know, the wood, and looking at my own hardwood floor differently.
And with driftwood, you wonder, where did it come from too, and where has it been around the world?
That's right. That's right.
Interesting.
And just trying to embrace that wonder in a time when it can be hard to do so. And it's a time that we're all kind of also being faced with ourselves.
Right.
And here we are, like, okay, we're being faced with that. So I don't know, compassion and play.
It's a wonderful world. The more you look at it, the more you wonder.
And that curiosity is where creativity is born.
Yes. Cool. Well, thank you, Kenna. This has been great. Good to connect with you again. It's been a while since we've talked. As I say, we've got coming up on October 1st with Greg Gorman and October 5th with Cheryl Walsh. Next week, I'm taking the week off because of the Portrait Masters Conference and the Palm Springs Photo Festival and the Glazers classes all going on online. So I think the photo world is going to be filled with online things next week. We don't need to take away from that. So we'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Who plans this? Who plans this in the middle between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
Well, these are all things that have been rescheduled. Palm Springs was supposed to be in May and got rescheduled to this next week. The Portrait Masters was supposed to be the first week of September and got pushed back because of the
But
pandemic.
It's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy
And for all
times.
those like me, Lashana Tova.
Thank you. Be well, my friends.
Be well. Thanks everyone for joining. Awesome to see
Yeah.
the community.
I'm gonna
Take care.
close.